As the mining laser beams pierced through the rock, the three characters worked in tandem to extract valuable resources from the asteroid. The air was thick with the sound of clanging metal and grinding stone, accompanied by the hum of the laser. The three of them were sweating profusely, but their grim determination kept them focused on their task. Jack, a gruff, seasoned miner, was in charge of operating the drilling machine. His rough hands were calloused from years of handling heavy machinery, and his face was etched with deep lines that told the story of a hard life. Sarah was a young, bright-eyed geologist. She was responsible for analyzing the composition of the rock as it was extracted, using her extensive knowledge of minerals and geology to identify valuable deposits. Her enthusiasm and energy were infectious, and she never failed to bring a smile to the face of her companions. The boss was a mysterious figure. No one knew much about him, except that he was the one who had funded the mining operation and that he had a reputation for being ruthless and unforgiving. He rarely spoke to the other two, preferring to stay in the background and observe. As they worked, the tension between the three of them began to build. Jack and Sarah chatted animatedly as they worked, but the boss remained silent and aloof, observing their every move with a critical eye. Suddenly, the drilling machine malfunctioned, sending a shower of sparks flying. Jack swore loudly and began frantically trying to fix it, while Sarah rushed over to assess the damage.
"What's the problem?"
the boss demanded, his voice cold and sharp.
"It's the power coupling, sir,"
Sarah replied.
"We'll need to replace it before we can continue."
"How long will that take?"
"Probably a few hours at least."
Sarah replied, glancing nervously at Jack. The tension in the air was palpable, as the boss glared at the two of them.
"I'm paying you both a fortune to get this job done on time. I don't have time for delays."
Jack stood up, his face darkening.
"We're doing the best we can, but sometimes these things happen."
The boss glared at him, his eyes blazing with anger.
"Don't you dare talk to me like that, miner. I could replace you both in an instant if I wanted to."
The three of them stood there, locked in a tense standoff, as the sound of the mining laser echoed through the cavern. It was clear that something had to give, and soon. As they waited for the replacement part to arrive, the tension between the three of them only grew. Sarah tried to break the silence by making small talk, but her attempts were met with stony silence from the boss and increasingly short responses from Jack. Finally, the replacement part arrived, and they set to work fixing the drilling machine. Sarah had just finished tightening the last bolt when she heard a strange noise coming from deep within the asteroid. It was a low, rumbling sound, growing louder by the second.
"What the hell is that?"
Jack asked, his voice rising in alarm. The boss looked up from his tablet, his expression grim.
"It's a seismic event. The asteroid structure must have been compromised by our drilling."
Sarah felt a cold pit form in her stomach as she realized the implications.
"We need to evacuate."
The boss nodded in agreement.
"Grab whatever equipment you can carry. We need to move fast."
As they made their way through the dark, winding tunnels of the asteroid, the rumbling grew louder and more intense. Rocks began to fall from the ceiling, and the ground shook beneath their feet. Sarah stumbled, nearly dropping her equipment, and Jack reached out to steady her.
"Thanks,"
she said, her heart racing.
"Don't mention it.
He replied, a faint smile crossing his face.
We're in this together, right?"
The three of them burst out of the tunnel and into the open air, just as the asteroid began to break apart. Huge chunks of rock hurtled through the sky, while the ground shook violently. The boss led them to a nearby shuttle, and they climbed aboard just as the asteroid exploded in a shower of debris. As they flew away from the asteroid, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of relief mixed with fear. They had narrowly escaped with their lives, but the consequences of their mining operation had been catastrophic. She wondered if they would ever be able to face the consequences of their actions. Jack, meanwhile, was feeling conflicted. He had always prided himself on his ability to extract resources from even the most challenging environments, but now he was starting to question the ethics of his work. Was it worth risking lives and destroying ecosystems for the sake of profit? The boss, for his part, remained silent and stoic. It was clear that he had other priorities besides the safety of his employees, and Sarah couldn't help but wonder what his true motivations were. As they landed back at the mining colony, the three of them went their separate ways. Jack retreated to his quarters to think, while the boss disappeared into his office without a word. Sarah, meanwhile, had a plan. She had discovered something valuable during their mining operation, something that could make her rich beyond her wildest dreams. It was a rare mineral that could only be found on a few asteroids in the galaxy, and she knew that she could sell it for a fortune on the black market. During all of the chaos, she had stuffed as much of the mineral in her bag as she could. She went back to her room and started to organize it and get a better idea of what she had. With this, she could help save her parents from the mines and live comfortably forever. Just as she finished packing it up, the boss walked in and realized what was happening.
What do you think you're doing?
His eyes flashing with anger. Sarah tried to back away, but he grabbed her arm in a vice-like grip.
You were going to steal from me. You're finished.
But Sarah was desperate, and she knew that she had to act fast. She pulled out a stun gun that she had smuggled in and fired it at the boss. He fell to the ground, unconscious. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah made her escape, running through the halls as fast as she could. She reached the courtyard just as the alarms began to sound, and she knew that she had to get off the mining colony as soon as possible. She made her way to the shuttle port, her bag of stolen minerals weighing heavily on her shoulder. But just as she was about to take off, she heard a familiar voice calling her name.
Sarah, wait!
It was Jack, his face filled with concern.
What the hell are you doing?
Sarah hesitated, unsure of what to say. But then she made a decision. She would tell Jack the truth, and together they could make a new life for themselves.
I'm stealing this and I'm leaving. Are you coming with me?
She held up the bag of minerals. Jack looked at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with uncertainty. But then he nodded, his face set with determination.
Let's go!
Together, they took off into the blackness of space, leaving the mining colony and their past lives behind. They didn't know where they were going or what the future held, but they knew that they were free, and that was all that mattered.